When you blow into a whistle, part of the airstream exits the slot in a swirling motion, generating sound. The rest of the airstream travels through the whistle chamber, then exits the slot, reinforcing the sound. The little ball whirling inside puts the trill in the whistle blast. Quality whistles are made of solid brass because nothing beats its resonance. Production begins with a narrow brass sheet not quite 4/100ths of an inch thick. A punch press slices through the sheet, cutting a square connected to two circles. The factory calls these pieces the Mickey Mouse ears. One by one, they go into a second press that folds the circles inward to form the sides of the whistle's barrel, and bends the edges of the square inward to form the top and sides of the mouthpiece. At the same time, it strikes the mouthpiece against a die that embosses the company logo into the metal. Another brass sheet feeds a third press. This machine punches out and partially shapes the part that forms the rest of the whistle. It notches the tapered end, which will be the underside of the mouthpiece, giving your teeth something to grip. Now, a fourth press finishes shaping these pieces. It bends the other end into a circle to form the barrel. The two main parts of the whistle are now ready. A worker snaps them together with pliers. Note that on the bottom piece, the barrel stops short of meeting the top of the mouthpiece. This creates the whistle's air slot. This press cuts and folds a brass sheet into the third and final part of the whistle, called the tip. It's a piece on the back that holds a ring for hanging the whistle. The tips go into a bowl feeder. The vibration orients them in the same direction so that a robotic arm can pick them up and put them in a holder. Tin and silver solder is applied to each tip. This will bond it to the whistle. To fuse all the parts together, solder is applied in 6 different spots. The solder liquefies as a gas flame heats it to about 1100 degrees Fahrenheit. It flows around all the seams, filling them in a matter of seconds. A blast of cold air solidifies the solder. Even then, it's still steaming as the whistle comes off the machine. The ball that goes inside the barrel is about a ½ inch in diameter and made of synthetic cork, which doesn't absorb moisture, so the ball never gets soggy and stuck. A worker holds each whistle, now plated with nickel, against the insertion machine. The device works like these pliers, squeezing a ball through the whistle's air slot. With one side of the barrel cut away, you can see how the ball regains its shape as soon as it clears the slot. The last step is to hook a steel ring onto each tip. The factory packages its whistles with a nylon cord called a lanyard. A hook on one end attaches to the whistle's ring. Another accessory in the package is a rubber cover for the mouthpiece. It makes holding the whistle in your mouth for a long time more comfortable. This factory also makes customized whistles. You can order them with your own logo, or to really blow someone away, you can present them with a 24-karat gold-plated award whistle. The first windshield wipers were invented in the early 1900s by a woman who got the idea from watching a trolley driver wipe the sleet off the windshield with his hands. After 1920, wipers became standard equipment on all cars. Today, even the space shuttle has them. These windshield wipers all have a rubber wiping blade. To make it, workers load natural rubber into a mixer that breaks it down into fine grains. Then, they add powdered carbon to the rubber and leave it to mix. After several hours, a worker cuts the rubber away from the mixer and feeds it into a heat treating machine. Next, the natural rubber strips enter an extrusion machine, which will combine them with the strips of synthetic rubber. The rubber extrudes through this steel die to form a continuous profiled band. The rubber band cools in a salt bath before it's cut into lengths, then split in half to form two wiping blades with a clean, sharp edge. The blades go through a spray of graphite to reduce friction, then drop onto a grate to dry out. The rubber is so smooth, it's hard to grasp, so workers must insert each blade by hand into an assembling machine. In the center of the wiper blade is an opening, into which a machine will insert a metal tension strip. It serves to press the blade in the windshield and hold its shape. The machine applies pneumatic pressure to literally blow the strips through the length of the blades. This steel coil feeds into a stamping machine that repeatedly cuts and bends it to form brackets. These brackets connect the windshield wiper blades to the wiper arm and give them the shape they need to wipe on curved windshields. The brackets come out of the machine in rows, still attached to the edges of the coil. Next, the rows of brackets dip into a vat of paint to receive a base coat, followed by two more coats of black paint that will protect them from corrosion for several years. Assemble all these pieces together, and you'll have this complete windshield wiper. Thanks to this machine, it's a fully automated process. First, it sets a plastic joint on the smallest brackets, then clips them two at a time onto a larger middle bracket. Next, the machine sets an adapter onto the top center bracket, so the wiper can attach to a variety of car wiper arms. Finally, all the trays on which lie the assembled wiper parts come together as the machine proceeds with the final assembly. 4 brackets held by joints branch out from the main center bracket. They hold the wiper blade in 8 different places. This design allows a full range of movement to the wiper while applying an even pressure all along the blade, the key to a clean wipe with no streaking. The completed wipers come off the assembler 2 at a time. Workers visually inspect the wipers and then test the performance of the blade against a rotating sheet of wet glass. They monitor the amount of friction the blade applies to the glass and gauge its durability. Finally, they test the wipers on an opaque black windshield that reveals just how well they work. With a lifespan of more than 1 million wipes, they're surely the most reliable device on any car.
There was a time when bowl making was a cherished trade passed down through generations of woodworkers. But today, with so much mass-produced tableware, handcrafted wooden bowls have become a specialty item. And this centuries-old traditional craft is practically a lost art. Each of these exquisite bowls is made from a solid piece of hardwood: beech, maple, walnut, or cherry. Logs arrive at the bowl mill fresh from the forest, so they're still very damp. And that's an advantage, because the moisture lubricates the cutting tools. The first step is to divide the log into blocks, with the chainsaw operator measuring and inspecting as he goes. Defects such as knots or scarring dictate the length of each block. Any cracks or other flaws are marked with a red crayon. Next, a rip saw operator uses different size bowl patterns to determine the best way to cut the block. The goal is to get the biggest bowl size pieces possible without including any defective wood. Each bowl-sized piece is called a bowl blank. This block is large enough to yield 3 blanks, each of which will produce a 17-inch bowl and a series of progressively smaller bowls that nest inside it. The blank is mounted onto a woodworking lathe. From this point on, production is entirely dependent on the lathe operator's skill. As the block spins, he carves out the bowls using a series of specialized knives designed and forged at this very mill. First, he uses this curved knife to shear off the outer portion of wood. It takes great expertise to know exactly how to angle the tool and when to pull it out and release the wood shavings and prevent a jam. After 2 or 3 minutes, the exterior bark shell has been sheared off. The bare wood that's left represents the outside of the largest bowl that he'll mill from this blank. With a finer blade, he sculpts the wood to just the right thickness and smooths the surface. Now he switches to a smaller curved knife and cuts into the wood. This forms the inside of the largest bowl and the outside of the next smaller one. The lathe worker repeats the smoothing and cutting process with progressively smaller knives, making bowl after bowl at a rate of about 1 a minute. This one bowl blank produces 4 nested bowls, the smallest measuring about 9 inches in diameter. The bowls are steamed for about 4 hours to draw out the sap and hydrate the pores of the wood uniformly. Once a bowl is dry, about a month later, workers even out the top rim on a sanding table. Then, using a belt sander, they smooth the outside and inside surfaces. A motorized saw shaves off the bottom of the bowl, giving it a flat base on which to sit, and a place to inscribe the company name. Businesses can order custom-made bowls featuring their company logo. Artists burn the design into the wood or paint it on. The bowls now go for a bath in food-safe mineral oil. This nourishes the wood, preventing dryness and cracks. Oiling also brings out the natural beauty of the wood grain, and because all raw wood is unique, no 2 bowls are ever alike. High-tech metal clubs rule today's golf courses. But don't count wooden clubs out of the game yet. Wooden golf clubs are all about tradition. Golfers have played with them for centuries. And some players still prefer the look and feel of these finely crafted clubs. Go with the grain, and your golf game could be on the upswing. Each club head starts with a log of persimmon wood, which is a type of ebony. It's sliced into quarters, and the lower quality center section is discarded. Each quarter is cut down into a workable shape and size, then it's locked into this duplicating machine. A more sculpted piece of wood called a master model is placed overhead. A wheel traces the contours of the master model and guides a blade below, so that it carves the rough chunk of wood into a duplicate of the master model. The first master model is swapped out for a more refined version, and again, the blade below copies the shape. The duplicate's stub is cut off, and it gets a light sanding. Next, using a spinning cutter, a generous slot is carved into the face of the club head. Heavy-duty glue is spread in the slot, and then it's plugged with an insert made of rigid plastic. This reinforcement will protect the club head from the force of the golf ball. The overlap is trimmed off, and the head is sanded until the plastic insert blends seamlessly with the wood. Next, a router is used to carve an hourglass shape into the bottom of the golf club head. This slot will hold the sole plate, which will add weight and protect the bottom of the club. The club head can't be more than 3 grams off the target weight. After factoring in the weight of the sole plate that's still to be installed, this club head gets a lead pellet to make it a little heavier. An extra hole is drilled in case more lead needs to be added later. Then the lead pellet is press fit to the club head. Adhesive is slathered into the slot. Then the stainless steel sole plate is installed. Again, sanding smooths away any bumps or grooves. A drill bores a hole in the neck of the golf club head, and a glue-coated metal sleeve slides into that hole. Then, the neck is tapered with a sanding belt. A jeweler's saw is used to score the face of the golf club head. These lines are critical because they help give the ball spin. The club head gets a dip in water-based stain that soaks into the wood but doesn't penetrate the metal sole plate. Then, things get messy, as a pasty substance is rubbed all over the golf club head, plugging the open pores of the persimmon wood. It's a crucial step that will ensure a mirror finish further down the line. The head is numbered to identify it as a fairway club. And then the sole plate gets a good scrubbing with steel wool to get rid of any fingerprints. 5 coats of polyurethane are sprayed on. Next, the glue-covered end of the shaft is pushed into the sleeve in the club head. The club's weight is fine-tuned with the addition of some pulverized lead into the extra hole drilled earlier. For a player to hit balls accurately, each club in the set has to feel as if it's the same weight. So there's one more weigh-in before this wooden golf club is up to par. Finally, it's time to hit the links with a club that lives up to tradition. Call them the poor man's answer to the rubber boot. Centuries ago, farmers chipped out holes in wooden blocks to keep their feet dry. Over the years, the blocks were refined into inexpensive but durable footwear. Today, they're most commonly associated with the history and tradition of the Netherlands. How they're made remains as basic as the shoe itself. Most wooden shoes are crafted from poplar, a wood that's easy to carve and generally free of knots, so the wearer won't encounter any splinters. A worker feeds pieces of poplar into a bandsaw, careful to toss any pieces with defects. The blade slices the wood into blocks called blanks. The factory uses vinyl patterns like this one to create the shape of the shoe. There's a pattern for each size of every clog style. A worker locks the pattern into a duplication machine called the shaper. Then right next to it, 2 blanks. As this tracer moves over the shape of the pattern, the wheel on the left copies its movements exactly. Its blade shaving the wood as it moves up and down. There's only one pattern loaded, yet the machine carves out a pair of shoes. That's because the wheel on the far left spins in the opposite direction. So as the blade saws away, it's creating 2 mirror image copies. That allows the machine to carve out both a right and a left shoe simultaneously. Now for the instep. A worker positions the blanks onto what's called a dual-action boring machine. The center rod is called a tasker. Its rolling head follows the curves inside the pattern. Spoon bits on either side of it copy the tasker's movements, gradually carving out the inside of the shoes. Now, workers shift the angle so the spoon bits can get in deeper, boring all the way to the front of the shoe. All that carving makes for a lot of wood chips. After a drying period, the toe knobs are cut off with a bandsaw, and the clogs are inspected for any flaws. A disc sander grinds down the knob on the heel and refines the shape of the toe. The shoemaker uses a barrel sander to smooth out the opening. Then they switch to a balloon sander. This sander has an air-filled sac inside it that flexes to the shape of the shoe. Now for the final step. An artist lays carbon paper on the shoe and a pattern on top of that. Then she traces the pattern. The carbon sheet transfers the design to the wood. Now she goes over the design with a wood burner. She changes tips and varies the temperature according to the size and depth of the line she's burning. This design commemorates Holland. Holland, Michigan, that is. The artist now uses water-based paints to enhance the scene with color. She applies 3 coats of a water-based varnish to preserve the artwork and help keep the shoes clean. While most clog-wearing farmers opt for a plainer version, true clogaholics appreciate a little pizzazz. But they'll leave crafting the clogs to the experts, because they've got some pretty big shoes to fill.